So, hello everyone. For anyone coming outside of Istanbul, welcome to Istanbul. We're very happy to see you all here. And we're happy to be a part of the Istanbul Fintech Week today. I am Elçin Karatay from Solak Partners Law Firm in Istanbul, and we have great panelists here today. I know that you will be able to learn a lot from them. These are information that you will not be able to get from research. All of our panelists are working on fintech area, blockchain area, banking and finance for a very long time and have great sector knowledge. So I hope that you will enjoy and benefit from this session. I'm very excited to be here. So let me just give a very quick roundup and ask you to introduce yourselves and what you're doing very quickly. Please go on.
Thank you so much for having me. I am Akshata. I am from UAE. I'm a partner at KARM Legal. And as a firm, we focus exclusively on fintech, crypto. And I'm really impressed with the event today and looking forward to learning more.
That's great to learn.
I'm Samir. I'm counsel at Baker McKenzie, the international law firm. And I'm the MENA FinTech and AI lead. Really happy to be here in this beautiful historical city of Istanbul.
Hi, it's a pleasure being here again for the second time. I'm Gauci, managing partner of GTG. I've been working in this industry now for approximately 23 years, exclusively on technology and fintech. And for the past 8 to 9 years, we had a specific focus on cryptos and DLT, given that we regulated heavily in Malta.
Thank you very much. So we have a very short time span to talk about a lot of things, so I'm starting in a very quick manner. So if that's okay, I'll ask from here and we can move forward in this line. So the first question that I want to ask is, what's happening in your jurisdictions? Are there any updates that you want to give us? Just very short points. It will be very helpful for us.
Sure.
So please go on.
A lot, actually, and I'm sure Samir will agree with what's been happening in UAE. So UAE, for those who know, is spread out between mainland and free zones. Some free zones, which are financial free zones, have come out with regulations for payments, crypto assets, as early as in 2018. But what Navi also has is one-of-a-kind virtual assets regulatory authority, an authority which is dedicated to regulating activities around virtual assets. They've passed the regulations, they have issued various licensing models. So in a nutshell, any of the intermediary activities that one can think of in virtual assets, right? Be it as a broker, be it operating a crypto exchange platform, or even simple advisory related services, there's a license for everything in UAE available now. This is in addition to the existing regime on issuance of tokens, which was always there. So different types of digital securities, fiat tokens, payment tokens. There are a bunch of different nomenclatures that one can look for when they are thinking of issuing anything which is in relation to virtual assets and tokens.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And I think we'll talk a bit more about what's happening in UAE, and maybe we can follow up with Samir on that point.
Yeah, I mean, the UAE, everyone's probably heard a lot about what's happening in the UAE, crypto jurisdiction, many people are coming to it, but it's a bit more complicated once you go to the level 2 analysis, because essentially the UAE is 3 separate financial regulatory jurisdictions. You have the Dubai International Financial Free Zone, the DIFC. You've got the Abu Dhabi Global Market, that's another free zone. So these are 2 separate free zones with their own regulators and their own regulatory frameworks. And then you have the area in between. And to make matters even more complicated, within Dubai, in that area in between, there is a new regulatory authority, which is the world's first ever dedicated virtual assets regulator, and that's VARA, the Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority. On top of that, there's federal regulators, so it's not a hop, skip, and a jump. It's quite a nuanced approach, and you really have to look at sort of what are the touch points with customers, et cetera, and what we're seeing there. But from a high level, we're seeing a lot. We're seeing one of the first jurisdictions in the world with, as we saw earlier on, a metaverse strategy, a blockchain strategy, an AI strategy. Very few jurisdictions in the world actually have all of that sort of, top-down and bottom-up approach in terms of ecosystem development and accelerator programs, plus government support and the regulatory frameworks in between, albeit, of course, somewhat complicated depending on, specifics. But yeah.
So in my case, it's a two-tier structure. Let's start from Malta, which is part of the European Union. I start from Malta because way back in 2017, we were definitely the first country in Europe to regulate. As a matter of fact, I was invited here. They were going to throw tomatoes at me when we told them that we were regulating. So we're regulating on the sphere of all activities, licensing model, regulatory handbooks. We created a supervisory function, supervisory authority. We created as well risk assessment for money laundering, business risk assessment, which was world's first as well. And that led us now to MiCAR. MiCAR is the European regulation. It takes predominantly, so we've created our legislation way back in 2017, very heavy regulation. Now we're in 2023, hopefully in April, MiCAR will be approved by the European Parliament. MiCAR takes 85%, 83 to 85% of our legislation. So practically have all the elements, and then obviously it evolved over time because ours was drafted in 2017. And in Malta as well, we boast that we already have 12 licensed operators, big operators as well. So they are licensed, they are regulated, and they have been regulated for some time. Now, why is MiCAR then so important? Right now, we're in the process of implementing MiCAR as we speak. So we're just retouching our legislation. License holders who already have licenses in Malta will have their license changed to MiCAR, and MiCAR gives a European dimension. Aside from having the Brussels effect, which is, its effect is outside the boundaries of Europe, particularly when you're targeting European clients. But with a MiCAR license, similar to what you have under e-money, under PSD, in the European system, you can have one license and your passport throughout all Europe. So Malta will be, I believe, one of the first countries, if not the first, who can switch the license immediately and have a regime which is MiCAR compliant. Okay, because we're already there. There is France as well, who's changing the legislation. There's Estonia. So that is predominantly where we are at right now. And I believe we'll have the legislation up and running as soon as MiCAR is approved by the European Parliament.
I think so. So very small comments. Sorry, I think this is not working. Okay, I'm here right now again. So I think, these jurisdictions are very important to see. As Akshata and Samir mentioned, UAE is one of the countries who have a very definite approach on how they want to move on and have a very modern approach. And Malta, as Ian suggested, will become an important player after the MiCA. And maybe it's important to know that that's a regulation in Europe, which means that it will be applicable right away. It's not like the countries will adapt their law. So it's a very interesting regulation piece to look at, and maybe going from then on UAE part. So this is a very general question, and I think is important for the audience too. So what do you think your jurisdictions offers to the company? So if a company wants to come to UAE, how will they find it? Are there any setbacks? Are there any benefits, positive positions? So what would you like to say about it?
Sure. Let me actually take a step back and go 5 years ago, right? So at a point of time where maximum regulators and governments globally were discussing how to regulate crypto assets, the offshoots of it, some of them were banning it, some of them were coming out with announcements that they are there against that. UAE very quietly was one of the only jurisdictions which, like Samir mentioned, came out with blockchain strategies. Eventually they kept at it and came out with metaverse strategies. At a government level itself, there has been so much positivity towards digital assets and innovation that I think half of it makes life easier for everyone. In addition to that, they came out with regulations as early as in 2018. So one of the free zones, Abu Dhabi Global Market, already had regulations for ICOs for different types of tokens in 2018. Post that, the Central Bank of UAE launched regulations for the payment systems. And now, as we've discussed, there's a separate authority for virtual assets. So I always like to say this, that UAE is probably the only country which has one regulator and multiple licensing options at every 200 miles. So within one country, you have multiple regulators, multiple jurisdictions. There's just so much that the country has to offer in terms of setup, in terms of the definitive stance of the government and the jurisdiction where they are at, that I can be rest assured as a company that I am going to have a formal license, I am going to have a regulator backing it. And when I am to expand out of UAE into any other markets, I know that I'm properly regulated. Because all these regulations also, if you see, they are at par with Amica, at a PSD2. They've borrowed a lot and they have taken inspiration from different regulations around the world.
No, that was very helpful, actually. Samir, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think, when we're looking at crypto regulation, it's not just siloed. There are many other things that go, behind an ecosystem. And a key thing, of course, is investors, right? So, the financial free zones of the DIFC and the ADGM, and by the way, those are two free zones that I mentioned, they follow a common law-based approach. We can talk about that in, if time persists, but the UAE is a civil law country, but the DIFC and the ADGM financial free zones are common law-based and have English as its legal language. So for investors coming in, even though the onshore regulators, they do provide translations, etc., there are common law regimes that are familiar with for investors, etc. In the VC space, both the DIFC and the ADGM have got a specialized framework for how to set up a VC fund. Usually, as an asset manager, you need 500 to 700,000 US dollars locked up in prudential capital, and it's quite heavy regulatory requirement. But with the VC fund, you don't need that. There's actually no requirement so you can actually deploy that for investment purposes. So it's a regime that has a lot of ecosystems, both government and private, and hybrid as well. Another kind of unique feature I think about Dubai, which whenever I take clients to Dubai, they always reflect on this, is the openness with the regulators. You can literally go make a meeting with the regulator one-on-one, talk about your product, your solution, your vision, and have that access. And in many other jurisdictions, you just don't have that. And yeah, so those are just some ideas in terms of how the UAE is, can be a great setup.
Ian, do you have anything on Malta and Europe?
No, I think they are diametrically opposed. So we've been there. What UAE is doing, which is fantastic, and mind you, we talk a lot with UAE because they are doing as well a gaming regime. They're planning to have a gaming regime, metaverse, AI. We have done AI. You have a lot of capital. So I believe the inclination is quite positive. But we've been there in 2017, and they have to pay attention. We are diametrically opposed. So in order for you to tap Europe within the European context, the license is zero. Where not as much as with the European license, you can't tap certain countries in Africa. So it's different. However, the license carries weight. They took a lot from our regime, even the rule books, which is good, because they took the good things. They took from the French as well, the good things. Sometimes that's one of the things when you go first, then others learn from the process and refine it. They were smart, and they did it with other stuff. One suggestion, however, they should not do the same mistakes we did. So don't look at how many interest parties we had, over 400. We have 12 licensees in Malta. That carries problems, particularly in an industry which is cowboys and Indians. You have something else. You have a new regulator. It's not the Financial Services Authority, who is used to dealing with these complex issues, who has a network. So even though it's innovative as an approach, we had tried to do it to Malta, but we had the same reasoning. In Europe, we have ESMA. So you're creating an authority which has no links with other financial, you're understanding me, financial services authorities. So what about support? What about dialogue? What about communication? What about knowledge? From where are we going to get the knowledge? I think this is the way ahead, because cryptos, DeFi, staking in the future is going to be different. But it's not all a rosy path. There will be pitfalls. Collaboration could be good, because I don't doubt that Dubai has a fantastic value proposition, as much as Europe has a fantastic value proposition with BCAR, as much as the legislation might need to adapt it as well to create functional equivalence, not passporting. Yep. So collaboration, and I believe at collaboration level, your authority is already trying to seek, to GFIN and all the rest, collaboration on that front. So
I think your microphone.
Okay, so I think it went off. What I was saying is that the regime, all in all, both regimes, it's quite interesting to have these kind of regime for something so innovative. Very interesting, quite honestly.
Okay, you can make, but thank you very much for this. I think this is very interesting, and maybe just a follow-up question and some words about Turkey. Turkey does not have a consolidated regulation or a clear plan on blockchain, though it's just touches a lot of the other laws. So that's, I think, one of the good parts of the fintech and crypto area, and one of the setbacks for the law firms like us to review and understand the project. And when you see a project, there is just so much that you need to consider. So does this touch the banking laws? Does this touch the securities laws? Does this somehow touch the consumer laws? Anything related to e-money or anything related to financing? When you include this with the project itself, which also may have some problems, there is a bunch of legal structure you already need to get into. It's not only about the specific regulations on blockchain, crypto, or fintech itself. So I think that's a setback I know that you're all seeing. But how do you think it will evolve? And what do you think are some of the setbacks or helps that the companies are needing? Because from what I understand, in UAE there is different parts of the country and different regulators who's involved with this. I think that also adds up some professional requirement for help. But what are your thoughts on these ideas?
Actually, twofold, and because you mentioned setbacks, I mean, I wouldn't really call it a setback, but yes, definitely one step that everyone has to take is matching up to the expectation of regulators, right? Yes. So all the licenses that we are talking about, the entire regime that we are talking about, these are hardcore financial licenses. These are at par with any of the global standards. Jurisdictions like UKFCA or MAS Singapore have had such licenses for a while. But if anybody in the audience, and anyone who has interacted with tech startups and tech players would know that speed is the key for them, sure. Right? We are honestly yet to see an example where the speed of a regulator has matched with that of the intention and the ambition of a startup founder. And that definitely is likely to bring in setbacks for each of the sides, I would say, right? That will bring in setbacks for the tech players and for the regulators as well. Consumer protection is the primary concern for a regulator, so they can never do away with it. But at the same time, catching up with technology, understanding what it entails is definitely another sector which creates its own set of challenges and conversation. DeFi, for example, decentralized finance, definitely, it's yet to come to a place where any regulator can confidently say that yes, we completely understand it, or yes, we will regulate it, put our hands into it. And any of the players, tech players, are yet to come to a place where they can say, okay, make me the guinea pig, I'll be the first one for you to test it out on us. So yeah, more such examples I'm expecting for them to come in the future. Mm-hmm.
So what are your expectations for the future, or any heads up for the companies who wants to come to UAE?
I think in terms of the future, what we're going to see in the UAE, and bearing in mind, of course, UAE has got a lot of capital investment capabilities, both private and public, is a couple of things. I think on the regulatory side, on DAOs, DeFi, GameFi, we'll probably see a bit more clarification. I think on infrastructure, people always forget about the infrastructure part of these things, but I think in terms of cloud computing and data capabilities in the UAE, that is a strategic political play, actually, but I think it's a strategic play to position the UAE in the region in terms of being a data center, so we're probably going to see that. Everyone is talking about ChatGPT and AI, sure. and all the wonders that it can bring. I think that you know, in terms of AI regulation, everyone's talking about whether or not, you know, the black box behind AIs and lifting up the hood to see how those AI decisions were made. I think probably we will get some regulation at some point in the UAE, similar to what we have in the draft legislation in Europe, and a bit different from China. China's got a different kind of approach to its regulatory position on AI, but something to basically mandate those using AI products to explain how they arrive to the decision. There are already protocols out there. There's LIME, there's SHAP, there's a few different protocols that can be used in machine learning operations. Yeah, so that's some of my high-level thoughts in terms of what I see sort of moving forward. And of course, you mentioned education, Ian. I think education is super key. You know, there is the Dubai Future Foundation that has trained over 1 million coders, including in the UAE, Uzbekistan, and Jordan. And I think more and more partnership with educational institutions is important. My final point is when it comes to financial crime, the Financial Action Task Force recently put Jordan on the gray list. It was, I think, gray list for virtual asset risk.
Okay.
So I think those jurisdictions that are sort of up and coming, they needed to consider the AML processes yeah.
From the European front, I believe there's a lot of regulation coming up. So you have the AI Act, we have MiCAR, we have DORA, which is specifically on operational resilience. We're going to regulate IoT in Europe, so it's not only Malta, because Malta is a small player within Europe. There's a lot of things which are happening in Europe, which could be trendsetters as well as were similar to what happened in GDPR, in gaming. So it could set standards which don't exist in other legislations. However, one thing which is important, and which we are embracing as well, this is a new industry. If we're speaking about DeFi, if we're speaking about innovations within the tokenized, because I hate to use crypto, the tokenized world. If we're speaking about AI, okay, AI is so huge, okay, wide brushed, can capture practically everything within the software dimension and even within the services. So what is the point I would like to make? Innovation hubs. So innovation hubs are becoming very important, accelerator models and sandboxes, to the extent that now we have specific legislation mandating them. For example, in the EU, we have the DLT pilot, which is a European sort of extended sandbox. It will last 6 to 9 years. It can be renewed. Does not apply to cryptos, but it applies to securities, to financial instruments, to market makers, specifically on the financial industry side using DLT. So that's a sandbox. Under the AI Act as well, we have the concept of a sandbox, sure. Specifically mandated under the AI Act. A lot of authorities are doing their sandbox, and there's as well an international, GFIN if I'm not mistaken, there's an international organization of these authorities who join forces in tapping, understanding new technologies, new services, and even how to tackle new regulatory instances, even collaborating with other authorities. Because you might have VIRA, or might have the MFSA, for example, in Malta. But then we're seeing that if you have AI, and you might need to rope in the AI authority. There are a lot of data protection issues. You might need to rope in the data protection. Why? Because it's a one-stop approach. So if you have a sandbox, an innovation hub, and you're trying to give the maximum to the potential license holder, you're trying to amplify on all potential pitfalls. So this is very interesting, and I see there a lot of convergence, because before sandboxes were predominantly used for the software industry. They were not a regulated sector. Now it's becoming a regulated sector as well. This is something we have, and we're going to amplify as well in Europe as much as you have it, and you have innovation hubs as well.
Yeah, I think this is very important, and for anyone who doesn't know the success of sandboxes, which I believe is very important, I think UK example is also a great one to look at, and because the fact is regulator cannot always be fast as the startup companies, and maybe it should not be. I think, you know, decentralization and having this in a unique way, in a personalized way, in a not that central way is very exciting. But, you know, I'm not just saying this because I'm a lawyer, but when you look at the market and when you look at the projects, you understand why we need the law. And I think the past events of this year has shown us, why financial sector, the markets, and some of the technology is regulated. I know that this slows things a lot, and this may cause some frictions, but I think finding these jurisdictions who want to be involved in this process and being a bit patient, because unfortunately it cannot be as fast as how the startups are wanting. But from the talks that I'm getting and from the projects I'm seeing, I think what startups and companies and the big players who wants to get deep into these new technologies has to acknowledge that they need to talk to the regulators, they need to tweak and change the projects a bit, and they need to find these ways, push for the regulators, and push for these gray areas, and to find that solutions. And the ones who are some of the initial players has an advance on this race. So it's still, yes, it's maybe costly, yes, it may take some time, but it's still a place to look forward, I think, and to create images. But yeah, please, Diane.
On this front, particularly even when you have a young regulator like Vira, even the others, you have to expect as well,
market players, that they will be a regulator who is prone to adapt technology. So here we have ComTech, SupTech, RegTech. That is a very important tangent for license holders, because there even the dimension of the regulatory gamut of a regulator changes drastically. And that can affect the bottom line as well. They become more efficient, but they will need to test as well. And there's a journey that have to do with the potential operator. I would say that Vira will be one of the, in Malta we try to do it, but there's a European bloc where to a certain extent shackled, because you can't do things outside of the existing regulatory regime. You there stand to gain, particularly with an AI strategy, because that underpins as well SupTech component and RegTech component. So expect as well this innovation from regulators, because it will be forthcoming.
Absolutely. I mean, we've even worked on projects where we advise regulators on SupTech. Yeah, and I mean, what's interesting about VARA is the people who are staffing VARA are actually most of them are from industry.
FCA.
Yeah. Not only regulators, but a lot of them from industry, like heads of legals at big fintechs globally and crypto companies globally. So that's been a welcome sign. I think that what we're one of the big challenges or lessons learned from recent events is that we're going to see, or we should see at least, VCs play a stakeholder activism role in making sure that the portfolio companies that they invest in either have or have a pipeline, or they mentor them to be regulated if you need to be regulated. Because like you said, crypto is just one big umbrella that is, it's like fruit. There's different types of citrus or nothing. Crypto is a big family, right? So, stakeholder activism on the part of VC investors and institutional investors, and expectations by startups that want to get funding to start thinking like and behaving like a regulated entity. And even if it's an unregulated activity, doesn't fall under a securities activity, still acting in a way that has good corporate governance, related party transactions, and good systems and controls. So I think that's probably what, if there's one thing I would hope to see and expect to see moving forward, in addition to what we said, I think it's, an industry responsibility in that regard.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, just final thought to add on to what Samir said. We've also seen a significant decline in the concept of headquartering a business in a certain place, right? So every project that you see will have token issues from one jurisdiction, the platform is based in another jurisdiction, investors are sitting in the third, which is fantastic because they have best of all the worlds. But at the same time, it creates problems from a governance perspective. And a couple of regulators in UAE have actually demanded this as a part of their licensing regime, that the companies are headquartered in UAE. So at least that the predominant founding team at least is based out of the jurisdiction.
That's really interesting too. And anyone I think working on this area would say this. So this is an innovative area that, the lawyers are not trying to, create these laws for you, but they're trying to help you, become this company who, when things are going back, you're still strong and you can still going, and that should be the part of the regulation anyways, and we're all trying to, I think, help with that. And I also believe that self-regulation is a big trend on this industry, and, I've always been very lucky to work from, day zero when there is nothing in law, but all these companies who acted like they're regulated, who get, even it's, loses them some time or loses them some money, invest in how can we be like a regulated entity, how can we do this correctly, I think is now who we're seeing still in the market. So that's a runaway from what I believe. And we have a very small time. As this is a 30-minute panel, we didn't have a lot to take Q&As, but our panelists, I think, will be here today all around. So catch them if you can and ask any questions there. And I just want to have a small round of any final thoughts, anything you want to add. And thank you again very much for being here.
Lovely. Thank you so much. So thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to a lot of development and a lot of collaboration between Turkey and UAE. And I'm very happy to be here.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, my final thought would be, if there's any fintechs or startups out there, whether it's remembering that your service might be a financial service, it might use technology, but it still might be a financial service, to have it within the DNA that then brings in regulatory framework, governance framework, etc. And not only for when things go bad, but for attracting capital and scaling up. And in terms of Istanbul, I would say teşekkür. Thank you so much for the kind invitation to beautiful city with great culture, great history, and great people, and mashallah, great human capital.
Thank you very much. Ian?
I'm going to be brief. I should start by thanking Istanbul for having me a second time round. I enjoyed it last time, I enjoyed it this time. We've been seeing all these people here attending, it's fantastic. I will say something simple. For people interested in this industry, you've seen a lot here happening, there's a lot happening. You need to be patient. Expect a lot of changes. Even upcoming legislation. Certain legislation will be finalized, certain issues which were discussed 2 years ago are already obsolete. Okay, so you need to be patient. You need to have an open mind on certain things, and yes, you need to have good counsel if you really want to delve in this industry, because it's a very complex industry. Even for serial entrepreneurs, it is a very complex industry. Things will get better, but it's part of a long journey.
I also think that, and I hope Turkey can learn from what UAE and Malta and Europe is doing, and we can have a legislation which will compete with you guys in a short notice.
One final comment is, I'm not sure if everyone has heard, but the UAE and Turkey has signed a trade deal with each other in March. Now, that is expected to raise non-oil, so leave oil trade to one side, non-oil exports from 18.5 billion to 45 billion in 5 years, with almost 92% of goods having a customs exemption. So what does that mean? That means there's going to be flow of people, flow of ideas, payment solutions, tech solutions, fintech. So it's an exciting time for many of us.
I think there is a lot of ways to collaborating, and thank you very much for this crowd to listening this regulation shell subject, and thank you very much for our panelists to be here, and thank you Istanbul Fintech Week for getting us all here. Thank you.
Thank you.